I'm Cole Haddon, and welcome back to 5 a.m. Story Talk. Welcome back to 5 a.m. Story Talk, my friends. This week brings you a mini-sode from this arts and culture podcast, which I hope offers something to writers out there. Screenwriters, fiction writers, really all writers trying to engage with readers and viewers who have been pre-programmed at this point in the 21st century to expect sort of cut-and-paste storytelling, narratives, essays, and such. I'm not a big fan of how-to guides about this kind of thing, but I do want to start sharing here some of what I've learned about craft and present it in a context that also comments on the relationship between art and commerce in the 21st century, and what that means for our culture too. Today, we're going to talk about the pernicious, I might even say poisonous effect Blake Schneider's Save the Cat screenwriting guide has had on film in particular. But everything I describe has implications for TV and the publishing world, I think. It'll also probably go a long way to helping you, if you're not a screenwriter, understand how Hollywood films became so narratively predictable in the 21st century. Nothing I'm going to say here is universally true, obviously, there are many exceptions. But in general, I do believe you could describe it as a rule in Hollywood today. It's catastrophically harmed the business and our culture, I would argue. It's also harmed the viability of the theatrical experience. And there are shades of what has taken place that do reveal why I think so many tech bros today are convinced anyone can write a feature script or a TV pilot with the help of generative AI. Now, before we dive in, I want to remind you that you can become a paid subscriber to this podcast, including 5 a.m. Story Talk's newsletter, by heading to the show notes. You'll get exclusive access to bonus episodes in which my guests break down foundational pieces of art from their lives for you, but also hundreds of screenwriting, writing, and other arts and culture articles and learning resources, and a monthly art seminar in which you can hit me up with any questions about the arts or arts industries you might have. If a paid subscription is too difficult in these crappy times, I get it. A 5-star review is a great no-cost way to support what I'm doing here instead. Upcoming guests of 5 a.m. Story Talk include cyborg anthropologist Amber Case, musician Ben Lee, and Schmigadoon creator and showrunner Cinco Paul. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already so you don't miss out. Okay, I think that's everything for now. So let's talk about what it means to put the cat in the blender as a screenwriter. Not so long ago, I had lunch with a screenwriter, and as screenwriters do when they get together, we talked about what we were working on. She had a new spec she'd just nailed, and I asked her to tell me about it. As she did, though, I predicted how the entire story would unfold, based on the initial concept. When she began to pitch some of the major beats out, my suspicions were so confirmed that I interrupted and told her what was going to happen next. It was rude, and I didn't mean to, but it happened and I feel bad about it. That said, I wasn't wrong. That's because the spec had been written and explained using an incredibly formulaic approach to screenwriting that evolved, I'd argue, from a lot of exciting, interesting, and very successful commercial films of the 1980s and 90s. By 2005, the year I arrived in Hollywood, all these original stories, many that broke rule after rule, culminated in a screenwriting guide called Save the Cat, the last book on screenwriting you'll ever need. Well, I'm here to tell you it's not, and if anything, you shouldn't think of it as much more than one approach, one of many you should learn and consider before you throw it out and start doing your own thing. As Picasso said, learn the rules like a pro so you can break them like an artist. If you don't, you end up pitching me a spec script you just wrote based on an outline I could have guessed from the concept alone. Am I especially gifted when it comes to Hollywood structure? I wouldn't say gifted, but I would dare to say I know it like a pro at this point. A good friend, a producer, once said to me, I told them, listen, Cole knows structure better than any other screenwriter I know. Let him nail the first draft, then we'll hire someone to tackle the character work. A, I think he thought this was a compliment. It was not. B, I've often cited this exchange as a reason I was so happy to leave Hollywood for the UK, because my British agents and every British producer I met thought I was a character writer instead. But that's a story for some other time. What I'm trying to say is, I have studied American screenplay structure in all its variations, inside and out, through analyzing films themselves, which I think is a much better way to do it than memorizing some screenwriting guide's beat sheet. I'm referring again to Save the Cat here, which has a beat sheet that's become so common, so ubiquitous, that even Final Draft helps you use it. Because of its role in brainwashing emerging screenwriters and young development execs, I can now all too often predict what's coming next in a film I bought a ticket to. This is a big reason why 4/5 of the films I watch every month were produced before Save the Cat became the default setting for Hollywood storytelling, and, by way of its influence on the world, sometimes the films produced elsewhere. See, I want to be surprised. If you follow Save the Cat's beat sheet, I, and audiences, generally won't be. Oh, they might not recognize it, the audience I mean, but there is a familiarity to narratives now that leaves viewers incredibly passive. They're all too often not required to participate because the story's emotional and plot beats are on a kind of cruise control until the credits start to roll. Sit back, let it happen to you, go home. Hey, maybe this has something to do with why the theatrical experience has struggled in the past decade. When every franchise movie hits all the same character and plot beats, you get bored. You find something else to do because we crave surprise when we go to the movies. Now, here's the thing for screenwriters aspiring and emerging and all too often established these days. Pulling this off is a catch-22. Today, the vast majority of development execs, studio execs, and so on have been trained on Save the Cat, and their careers have been built on understanding Save the Cat's beat sheet as the exemplar of what a great film is. I've had a producer, quite literally, pull a copy of Save the Cat out to tell me why I was doing something wrong. Consequently, these people's intellectual metric of what makes a great film is often Save the Cat, which was written by the late screenwriter Blake Schneider, by the way. But the catch-22 I mentioned, that's what their emotional metric is, which is the desire, no, the need, to be surprised. Like movie-going audiences, they need something new and surprising to happen to them while reading your script, or else it won't really register with them. This, I would suggest, is one of the reasons why spec scripts by new screenwriters make so many appearances on the blacklist. They're screenwriters doing something different, something fresh, and it surprised people enough to hire them to write something by the book. And when I say by the book, I mean according to Save the Cat. I wish I could tell you how to navigate this catch-22 after you break into the business and everyone expects you to fall into line and, write with Blake Schneider's voice in your ear. But the best chance of doing that, I'd say, is getting lucky enough to pair with a filmmaker or two who managed to encourage and protect your voice early on. Not easy to do, but up front, that's a different story because you're trying to get people's attention, right? How do you surprise these producers, these studio execs, these agents and managers when they're convinced the only way a script is good is if the protagonist saves a metaphorical cat somewhere early in the first act? Or frankly, any of the other rules laid out in Save the Cat. Which brings us at last to the point of this episode of 5 AM Story Talk. You put the cat in the blender instead. Let me explain what that means so PETA doesn't come after me. In the distant time when I still lived in LA, someone in my life transitioned from producer to screenwriter. They wrote a psychological horror spec I loved, but I was bumping on a scene that felt safe to me. It got the job done, yes, but I saw an opportunity to surprise the reader, which I argued was key. I thought they needed to do something so audacious on the page that it made the reader gasp, like, holy shit, I've never seen that before. And most importantly, sent the reader running to their boss to tell them, you've got to read the script. In the script as it was, the protagonist goes into a kind of hallucinatory state and wakes up to discover she killed her beloved pet cat with her conductor's baton. Just sort of stabbed it over and over, blood splatter, you get it. My suggestion to this writer? This protagonist had to wake, go into the kitchen, and find blood all over the cupboards, the floor, the counter, the walls, everywhere. Picture the end of Fargo, but inside an apartment's galley kitchen. And there, in a blender, is what remains of her cat, with the conductor's baton sticking out of it since she used the baton to keep, stabbing the cat into the blender as it was blended up. Like I said, put the cat in the blender. On one hand, this struck me as such a perfect rebuke of the absurdity I found in using Save the Cat, especially that Save the Cat term, when writing your own screenplays. On the other, it suggested a scene that could be immediately iconic, the kind of scene people would talk about coming out of the theater, the kind an exec might run into their boss's office to shout, "You've got to read the script," about. In the years since I offered this advice, put the cat in the blender has become, for me, synonymous with subverting Save the Cat. When I give notes on a script, I'll often bring up this theory when discussing the first act. How do we blow up expectations of what this script will be? How do we take the predictable, that paint-by-numbers, beat-sheet stuff, and turn it on its head, in as many scenes as possible, too? Not twists. Twists are just cool plot devices. But something that defies the expectations created by a 20-year-old screenwriting guide that always, in my opinion at least, seemed to miss the point about what made great movies work, which is a kind of handmade quality, as much singular life experience as creative spontaneity and inspiration. What I mean by that is a sense that an author is present in the story, that decisions were made that were more what if, or and then, both great ways to move from one scene into the next, than what does Blake Schneider's beat sheet say we should do next? One involves qualities I would describe as artistic, original, authentic to the storyteller themselves. The other sounds a lot like asking ChatGPT to write your first draft, which might be why so many people now think they can write something as good as a Hollywood film using generative AI, which might also be why so many people can't be bothered to spend a small fortune to go to movie theaters to see Hollywood films they've consciously or unconsciously come to find safe, uninspired, and even creatively inert. At this point, I want to provide a recent example of a film that I would describe as the exact opposite of everything I just said, which is why I would suggest it was such an incredible hit at the box office. However, I warn you now, it involves a spoiler about the midpoint of Sinners from writer-director Ryan Coogler, which is another way of saying, if you're not okay having it spoiled for you, hit stop now. Still here? Okay, so at the start of Sinners, the narration tells us, there are legends of people born with the gift of making music so true it can pierce the veil between life and death, conjuring spirits from the past and the future. This gift can bring healing to their communities, but it also attracts evil. Great setup, and according to Save the Cat, that veil-piercing musical event should happen at the first act turn to set the film's real action in motion. Instead, Coogler gives it to us as a midpoint reversal. That itself is unconventional, sort of the equivalent of putting maybe only a kitten in a blender. But he shoves a cat in there too when our blues musician starts playing a song so true that past and future begin to mingle with the present. What I mean is, Jimi Hendrix shows up, and then tribal musicians from Africa begin to dance. There are soul singers and break dancers and rappers and hip-hop dancers. The Black American musical story, which is far more of a continuum, predicated on storytelling that is hundreds of years old and ongoing, plays out before our eyes, and it is glorious. I've never seen anything like it. None of it was necessary for Sinners to make sense, and yet it's so specific, it's so singular, that it's exactly why this midpoint reversal transcends plot and will be talked about for decades to come. Surprised was the least of what I felt, which is why today I'm telling you about Sinners, because Ryan Coogler had to buy blenders in bulk to get rid of all the metaphorical cats he decided to mass murder with this film. Sinners is so damn good, so damn original, so damn audacious that it turns people into evangelists on its behalf. Long story short, screenwriters, put your cats in the blender. Blend them up. Splatter everything with all their gross cat bits, because who knows what'll happen next then? Which is kind of the point for your characters, your initial readers, and hopefully, eventually, your audience. Thanks for listening, Story Talkers, wherever you are in this great big mess of a world. If you have any questions about what I covered today, drop them in the comments at the 5 a.m. Story Talk newsletter or the 5 a.m. Story Talk podcast Instagram account. Links in the show notes, along with some other articles I think are relevant to what we talked about today. All right, that's everything for today, except to say, I've been so grateful for the feedback I've been receiving about 5 a.m. Story Talk as it continues to grow, thanks to your support. It's a hell of a lot of work to launch a podcast like this one, especially when you're a one-person show. So it means a lot to know this conversation about the arts and storytelling, about our culture, about where we've been, where we've ended up, and what comes next is resonating with you. I'll see you next week for some more 5 a.m. Story Talk.